winning in fantasy football is all about hitting on risks. If you don't take risks on ESPN or on Underdog Fantasy Football, you're going to build a good team, but at the end of it, you're going to be up against a really good team that drafted riskily and has now hit on their risks, so their team now has a ceiling that your team can only dream of. The question is, how do you find out which players are smart to take a risk on and which players should you be letting the other league mates in your league draft? Just recently in the NFL, we've seen some of the most impressive rookie wide receiver seasons of all time. But for some reason, the ESPN ADP and Underdog ADP has not changed to reflect more rookies coming in and having amazing seasons. This graphic is our rookie wide receivers from last season, starting with the rookie wide receivers all the way to the left, what pick they were drafted with, their ADP on Underdog from 2024, their positional ADP, so which wide receiver were they being taken off the board in Underdog fantasy drafts, where do they finish last year in half PPR, because that's the way Underdog does their scoring. And then that first colored column is their finish differential, which takes where they were expected to finish, which is where they were being drafted at, versus where they actually finished. So a bigger number in green is a very positive outcome, and then a bigger number in red is a negative outcome, meaning you underperformed. Now, what we want to look at here is how much these successful wide receivers helped you out. If you picked Brian Thomas Jr. or Ladd McConkey or Malik Neighbors, they hit so hard that they actually covered up some shortcomings in your draft strategy or bad picks that you may have made, which brings me to my number one point here, which is you got to take risks to win on ESPN and Underdog. One bad pick could lose you your buy-in of $3, $5, $10, or $25, but even one good pick could win you the whole thing. You could win hundreds of dollars or even thousands of dollars while playing on Underdog Fantasy Football. So looking at this list, Brian Thomas Jr. went up 34 spots and Ladd McConkey moved up 32 spots. These are stuff that just doesn't happen when you are drafting with veterans, which also brings me to my second point, which is rookie wide receivers come with uncertainty and they're inherently boom bust players. Now, we're looking for these boom players because Underdog is best ball, so all that counts is just your high scores for that week, which is why we really love to see our boom bust players. Looking at some of our ADP here, these are where a majority of our rookie wide receivers are coming off the board. You can see all in a row from wide receiver 43 to 46. We have 4 rookies: Luther Burden, Matthew Golden, Travis Hunter, and Emeka Egbuka. And what I like about these players is we have no idea what they're going to be when they come to the NFL. The veteran players in this range, Jacoby Myers, Khalil Shakir, and Cooper Kupp, we already know what they're going to do in the NFL. We've seen Jacoby Myers and we've seen Khalil Shakir on these teams, and they're not going to come out of nowhere and drastically overperform expectations. The way any of these rookie wide receivers, they could hit the league and any one of them could be much better than we are expecting. Now, could 3 of the 4 of them be busts? Yes, but like I talked about, one good pick can be the entire difference. At least one of these guys are going to end up in the top 16, in the top 12, that area of the draft, and they're going to be absolute league winners. You want to make sure you're in on them. The one guy that I haven't mentioned yet, Brandon Ayuk, him coming off of a torn ACL, you never know what he's going to do. So I guess there is a tiny bit of uncertainty, but with the uncertainty and the upside that these rookie wide receivers bring, I would definitely much rather take a chance on one of the rookie wide receivers over Brandon Ayuk. My third point here is these rookie wide receivers are being drafted with plenty of room for improvement, so we are getting the right price to take a risk on these guys. Now, if we look at where our rookie wide receivers are coming in this year, we have Luther Burden, Matthew Golden, Travis Hunter, and Emeka Egbuka all being drafted in the 80s. Their positional ADP, like I said, they are all being drafted in the high 40s. You're telling me these guys, even if they finished as wide receiver 28 or 30, that would be a successful pick. The reason why I have not mentioned Tedero McMillan is because he's being drafted at ADP of 50, and positionally, he is coming off the board at wide receiver 28, which means it will be significantly harder for him to have that really big season that Brian Thomas Jr. had. Now, if you ask me, what do I think of 28, an ADP of 28 for Tedaro McMillan? I think it's something that he can easily outperform, and I do like that ADP for that player. But these other guys being drafted this low gives them plenty of room for improvement on this ADP, and is why I'm really focusing in on that cluster of players specifically, because we don't know how good these players are going to be when they get to the NFL. We watch a ton of times guys that fall to the second round, like Ladd McConkey, T. Higgins, and Michael Pittman Jr., still turn into highly successful fantasy assets. Now, you may be asking, how do you figure out which fantasy wide receivers you should be drafting? And there are some wide receiver boxes historically that we want to take a look at to figure out who is going to be a successful wide receiver and who won't be for fantasy purposes. And that is draft capital. You want to make sure they get drafted early. You want to see them declare after 3 years, not 4 years. The guys that use up all their eligibility in school are usually worse prospects, but currently NIL is kind of skewing this metric, so it's not as predictive as it used to be. Dominator rating, you want to see them dominate as an over 30% dominator in college. You want to see them break out as a sophomore, and you want to, or a freshman year breakout would be even better. You want to see them run fast at the NFL Combine. You want to see them run under like a 4.6 in that area. And you also want to make sure these are guys that are playing with teammates as well. They're not just the one and only guy in their offense. If it's a player who is the one and only receiver in their offense, it's a lot easier for him to run up stats. But then at the same time, if you're a player like an Emeka Egbuka, whose stats might not be as impressive as other wide receivers historically, you can look at the context and see that he's playing with amazing wide receiver prospects right next to him, like a Marvin Harrison Jr. and like a Jeremiah Smith. So it's more understandable that he's going to have less yards. But we can go through these guys player by player. First, looking at Luther Burden, him being drafted he currently by NFL Mock Draft Database being projected as an early second round pick. He declared as a junior. He dominated through college. He broke out as a sophomore. He ran fast enough. The one red flag we have on him is his teammates are not being projected to be drafted. Brett Norfleet, the tight end, he is not coming out in this year's draft, but we don't know how highly he is projected to be being taken in next year's draft should he declare. Theo Weiss is the other wide receiver in the Missouri offense this season. He's entering the draft. Currently, NFL Mock Draft Database is projecting him as an undrafted free agent. So we cannot factor him too much into our formula here. But there is one red flag that I haven't talked about, and that's the fact that at Missouri, Theo Weiss actually put up more yards this season than Luther Burden. Now, I like the film on Luther Burden, but if you want to tell me he wasn't even the number one target, the number one receiving yards getter in his own offense, I can't draft him because of that. I would absolutely support that way of thinking and understand it. The reason why Luther Burden reminds me of Brian Thomas Jr. is because he has a specific way of winning in the NFL, and he's going to hit the league day one, and it's going to work or it's not going to work. Brian Thomas Jr. was a deep threat at LSU, and you could see that he was going to hit the NFL and he was going to be able to get behind everybody just like at LSU, or he wasn't going to be able to. And he was a big boomer bust player. Now, Luther Burden is like a Deebo Samuel type, and he was more athletic than everyone in college, and he's about to hit the NFL, and he's either going to continue to be more athletic than everyone else, or he is not going to be athletic enough and he's going to fall flat on his face. But that's a risk I'm willing to take. And that risk with Brian Thomas Jr. is why he was my number one rookie wide receiver drafted all of last season. And other than taking the Rams wide receiver 3 in the final round of underdog drafts, Brian Thomas Jr. was my number one wide receiver being drafted with a real ADP of last year because of some of these boxes. Now we can see Matthew Golden projected to be a mid to late first round pick, which we like more than Luther Burden's early second round draft capital. He also declared early. He did not dominate through college. He was a transfer, only played at Texas for 1 year. He broke out in that third year at Texas, but this is a player, or he ran really, really fast. And this is a player who is going to have teammates drafted. Isaiah Bond has the talent to be drafted in the first 4 rounds. Maybe the recent news on him is going to knock him a little bit farther down the draft, but he definitely has the talent. Also, Gunnar Helm, a tight end, really high level tight end talent. He's going to be drafted in the NFL draft. So that lends a little bit of context to that lower dominator rating. But at the end of the day, it's just context. The point of the analytics and looking at the data is you look at it as just raw numbers. So that's still a red flag, the fact that he did not dominate as much as we want to see him go ahead and dominate. Now, Emeka Egbuka, our last guy here that we can see, getting early second round draft capital, which we like. He stayed in school for 4 years, which we don't like, but as a junior, he was dealing with that ankle injury and also playing with unbelievable prospects in his offense in Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jeremiah Smith and even Carnell Tate, all of guys who are going to be drafted highly in the NFL or have already been drafted highly into the NFL. So I'm personally willing to give him a pass on that 4 year on not declaring as a junior and then that dominator being lower. But if you aren't, if you're going to stick right to the numbers and say, I'm not giving anyone a pass on anything, I'm just going to look at the numbers, stick it into a formula and see how that fills out, I can absolutely support that way of thinking. Emeka Egbuka, he did break out as a sophomore and he did run fast enough. Now, there is one more wide receiver that is right now is absent from this draft. When I started preparing for this video, Travis Hunter was going off the board at wide receiver, or he was going off the board lower, but his ADP was 90. In about 3 days, he has jumped up 10 spots in ADP. Travis Hunter, when I was drafting back in January, he was coming off the board at an ADP of 154.1. And during that time, I was taking him in absolutely every single spot that I could. The reason why he is still going a little bit low is there is uncertainty about whether he is going to be a cornerback or a wide receiver in the NFL. Now, we know that he is most likely going to the Cleveland Browns. That's what the Vegas betting odds are telling us. We also know that he really wants to make sure he plays wide receiver and quarterback in the NFL. And this increase in ADP is reflecting the fact that people are keying in on the fact that he is going to be a two-way player and he's going to be highly successful in the NFL at doing this because he is on everyone's board as a guy who is the number one wide receiver. Should he play wide receiver full time? And this guy, he was the best player in high school, the best player in college. Why can't he be the best player in the NFL? I'm done telling this guy what he can and can't do. He's a star player. I think currently he is my number one drafted rookie wide receiver. I think he's an absolute star in the making. And I really think Travis Hunter is someone who you should be targeting in almost all of your drafts, but you want to make sure your percentage of Travis Hunter shares does not get too high. Although I think right now is still a really good chance to draft him because there's still a chance that he comes out of school as a full-time wide receiver. There's a chance that the New England Patriots select him at 4 and say, we have Gonzalez, we have Carlton Davis, we don't need you to play cornerback. You're going to be a full-time wide receiver. And if that's the case, wide receiver 46 for Travis Hunter or wide receiver 45, whatever, he changes like every hour. He keeps going up the board. That's going to be an absolute steal, and he could be a wide receiver 1 as early as his rookie year. But talking about what we can expect out of our other rookie wide receivers here, not everyone is a first-round guy, but some of my points from earlier still stand about these later picked guys. And the next thing we're going to talk about is our second-round hit rate. Outside of the first 7 picks, the whole second round, the hit rate is pretty flat across the board. So the data would suggest that you just want to take the guy who is getting drafted the lowest. So on what we have currently going on Underdog, we have Jack Besh and Alec Iomanner are your 2 lowest drafted guys in the second round. Jack Besh has an ADP of wide receiver 81 coming off the board at almost 200. Iomanner coming off the board at almost 180 and wide receiver 73. These are players that their hit rate is pretty good and suggests that you should draft them. And they have a ton of run to increase their finish. These are guys that can easily outperform these ADPs of 81 and then 73. And if you were drafting very recently after this video comes out, I would highly suggest loading up on Jack Besh because it feels like every time I update NFL mock draft database, the guy's just going higher and higher and higher in drafts, and scouts love this guy. So the strategy kind of continues as the same thing when we go to the third round. The data still suggests just take the guys who get drafted anywhere in the third round. They all have the same hit rate. So it's smart to take the guys with the lowest ADP because you can get in on that hit rate for the cheapest price. So if this is how it works out, I would be loading up on Kyle Williams and Jalen Royals. And currently I am loaded up on Jalen Royals. He is my number 2 overall wide receiver, overall player being drafted on Underdog Fantasy Football behind Travis Hunter. He's a guy who I think reminds me a little bit of Malik Neighbors. He's got a lot of athleticism. I think he's a very underrated player. I think if you look at fantasy football circles, people are pretty high on this player. But when it comes to underdog drafts, for whatever reason, he's going way down the board, and I think he is a value and would suggest getting in on him before his ADP goes too high to where you're not going to be able to draft him. On Underdog Fantasy Football, there are 12 teams in each draft, and 2 go on to the next round, which means just pure luck of the draw, your team has a 16% chance to advance to the second round and make some money. But with my strategies, my teams move forward at a rate of 26.9%, which means that my underdog teams are 1.6 times more likely to move on to the second round and make money in underdog drafts. So if you want to learn more about my strategies and find out how I can make my drafts so profitable, please hit the subscribe button and hit the like button and enjoy the rest of your day.